Okay, so we talk about historical moments a lot in tech.
Right, yeah.
Usually that means, I don't know, a new iPhone dropped or a stock price hit some crazy record high.
Or a CEO got into a fight on X.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. But what happened on February 27th and 28th of 2026, that feels completely different.
It does. It really does. It's a genuine inflection point.
Yeah.
And I don't use that phrase lightly.
We are talking about the first time in history that a domestic American company, and we're talking about Anthropic here, valued at what, $380 billion?
Right around there, yeah.
So they
Massive.
were officially designated a supply chain risk to national security.
Right. And just to put that into perspective for everyone
Yeah.
listening, that is a designation we normally reserve for foreign adversaries.
Like Huawei.
Exactly. Huawei, ZTE. Companies that the government basically deems to be extensions of a hostile state apparatus.
Right.
But this time, it's an American innovator sitting right there in San Francisco.
It's wild. It's just wild. And the players involved in this are absolute giants.
Hmm.
On one side, you've got the Department of War, led by Secretary Pete Hegseth under the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, you have Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic.
And reading through our source material today, this wasn't just some failed business deal.
No, absolutely not. So today we're doing a deep dive into this incredible article called The Silicon Schism by Fareed Novin.
Just published on March 1st.
Right, just yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And Novin frames this not as a contract dispute, but as a constitutional crisis.
A constitutional inflection point, I think he called it.
Exactly. It's this massive battle over whether a private company can tell the U.S. military no based on ethical and constitutional grounds and actually survive the fallout.
Oh, right. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We are going to figure out how a disagreement over an AI contract just completely spiraled into a ban that is shaking the whole industry right now.
We need to unpack the red lines that Anthropic flat out refused to cross. And we really want to connect this back to you, the listener, because this isn't just inside baseball for tech bros or Pentagon contractors.
No, not at all. This is about privacy, autonomous weapons, and basically the future of how democracies use or potentially abuse technology.
Okay, so let's get into the timeline, because the source describes this as a pressure cooker week in late February, and things escalated incredibly fast.
So fast.
Take us back to Tuesday, February 25th. Set the scene for us.
Okay, so the setting is the Pentagon. Secretary Hegseth takes a meeting with Dario Amodei. Now, the reporting says the meeting was cordial on the surface.
Cordial.
You know, handshakes, coffee, all the standard stuff. But the subtext was incredibly heavy.
Well, cordial is definitely a nice way of putting it, considering the threat that was basically dropped on the table.
Right. According to the Pentagon sources Novin cites, Hegseth didn't just ask for compliance. He actually threatened to invoke the Defense Production Act.
Whoa. Okay, the Defense Production Act. That's the Korean War era law.
Yeah.
Right? We usually only hear about that during, emergencies, like when the president forced companies to make ventilators during the pandemic.
Yes, exactly. It gives the executive branch these really broad emergency powers to force private industry to prioritize national defense contracts.
Right.
So Hegseth basically looks Amodei in the eye and says, sign the contract, remove your safety restrictions, or we will legally force you to comply under emergency law.
That is a massive hammer to drop.
And he added that if they didn't comply, they'd be designated a supply chain risk.
Wow. So it's essentially saying, we can nationalize your output if you don't play ball.
Mm-hmm.
So Amodei walks out of that meeting. What happens on Wednesday, the 26th?
Amodei releases a public statement, and he does not blink.
Not at all.
He says, and I'm quoting here, threats do not change our position. And he makes it crystal clear that Anthropic cannot in good conscience accede to the Pentagon's request.
So he just calls their bluff in public.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
He's betting that the bad PR of the government literally forcing a U.S. tech company to work for the military is going to be worse than just walking away from the contract dispute.
But the government didn't back down either. They gave them a deadline.
Friday, February 27th at 5:01 p.m. Eastern Time.
Man, you could just imagine the tension in those boardrooms in San Francisco. Lawyers sweating, the phones just ringing off the hook.
Total chaos, I'm sure.
So Friday rolls around, 5:01 p.m. comes and goes, the deadline passes. What happens?
The response was almost immediate. President Trump gets on Truth Social and posts that Anthropic has made a disastrous mistake.
Disastrousness.
Right. And he orders a government-wide cessation of Anthropic usage. Nobody in the federal government is allowed to use Claude anymore.
And then Secretary Hegseth follows up on X.
Yes. And this is the really crazy part. Hegseth formally declares the supply chain risk designation. But you have to listen to the exact wording there, because this is the killer move. The order says no contractor, supplier, or partner that does business with the United States military may conduct any commercial activity with Anthropic.
Wait. So they didn't just stop buying Anthropic software themselves.
No.
They told everyone else, if you want to work with us, the U.S. military, you cannot work with Anthropic at all.
Exactly. It is the nuclear option. It's a total market exclusion, a secondary boycott.
So if you're Microsoft or Amazon AWS,
Yep.
or even just like a trucking company that delivers food to a military base.
Right. If you touch the Department of War in any way, you have to dump Anthropic. It was designed to just cripple their revenue instantly.
That is unbelievable. So we have to ask the obvious question here. Why?
Right. Why blow up a $380 billion company?
Because normally tech companies bend over backward for government money. The contracts are huge, so what were the deal breakers?
It all comes down to two specific red lines. Anthropic had these restrictions in their contract, and they refused to remove them. The Pentagon wanted language permitting the AI to be used for all lawful purposes.
Okay, pause there. Because to a normal person listening, all lawful purposes sounds totally reasonable.
Right. It just means legal.
Yeah. Why would an American company object to something being used for lawful purposes?
Because in the context of advanced AI, lawful is a remarkably broad container. It basically opens the door to things that Anthropic is fundamentally opposed to. So let's look at the first red line, mass domestic surveillance.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source article mentions that the Pentagon wanted to combine the AI with data brokers. How does that actually work?
This is where it gets really chilling for the average person.
Yeah.
The Pentagon negotiators wanted the ability to feed the AI huge amounts of commercial data.
Like what kind of data?
Geolocation data from your phone, your web browsing history, financial data, credit card swipes, all this stuff you can just buy from data brokers right now.
Legally?
Legally, yes. So they take all this private data about where you shop, where you drive, what you search for online, and they feed it into a super intelligent AI model.
To do what exactly?
To classify citizens. The source article uses this specific term, the digital panopticon.
Panopticon. Okay, I know that word. That's the old prison concept, right?
Exactly.
Where the guard tower is in the middle of the yard, and they can see into every cell, but the prisoners never know exactly when they're being watched.
Right, so they have to assume they're always being watched. But here, it's algorithmic. Novin argues that even if the government claims they have entirely benign intent...
Sure, we're just looking for terrorists or whatever.
Right. Even so, the sheer technical capability creates a condition of what the author calls continuous probabilistic suspicion.
Continuous probabilistic suspicion. That is a heavy phrase. What does that actually mean for me, the listener?
It means it flips the presumption of innocence.
Oh.
Usually the state has to have a reason to suspect you did something wrong before they investigate you. They need a warrant or a probable cause.
Right, the Fourth Amendment?
Exactly. But with this setup, the algorithm is constantly scoring your everyday behavior to see if you might be a risk in the future. It's essentially pre-crime.
Wow. So Anthropic looked at that and said, absolutely not. We will not build the engine for that.
Right. But the Pentagon pushed back. They said, look, federal law already prohibits illegal mass surveillance, so you don't need to put a ban in our software contract. It's redundant.
And frankly, a lot of people might agree with the Pentagon there. If it's illegal, it's illegal.
Sure. But Anthropic's counter-argument, and this is a really vital point in the source material, is the difference between procedural safeguards and structural safeguards.
Okay, break that down.
A procedural safeguard is a law, or an internal policy, or an executive order.
Which can be changed.
Exactly. Laws change, administrations change, a new president signs a new order. But a structural safeguard is baked into the code itself, or it's a hard line in a commercial contract.
Privacy by design.
Yes. Anthropic argued that legal prohibitions just aren't enough when the technology is this powerful. You need technical and contractual friction to prevent misuse. They wanted it to be a literal breach of contract for the military to even try to build a surveillance panopticon.
So they wanted to make it contractually illegal, and the Pentagon said, no, just trust us to follow the law, but we won't sign that paper.
Precisely. And that brings us to the second massive red line.
Autonomous lethal weapons.
Yep.
Basically, killer robots.
Essentially, yes. Anthropic absolutely refused to allow their AI models to be integrated into fully autonomous lethal targeting chains.
Meaning the AI decides who to shoot. and pulls the trigger without a human.
Right. And Novin's article brings up the Geneva Conventions here.
Yeah, the accountability gap. I thought that part was fascinating.
It's a huge legal problem. The laws of war require a moral agent to be responsible for a lethal action, a human being.
Right, because if a drone drops a bomb on a civilian building by mistake, there is a human pilot or a commander that you can hold responsible.
You can court-martial a soldier, you can try a general for war crimes, you cannot put a software algorithm in jail. An AI cannot be a defendant.
So that's the legal and moral argument.
Right.
But wasn't there a purely technical argument from Amadei too?
Yes. Amadei argued that current AI models, even the best ones, still hallucinate.
They make stuff up.
Exactly. They lack deep situational awareness. Now, if ChatGPT hallucinates in a web browser, it's funny, or maybe you fail a test.
Right.
If an AI hallucinates in a chaotic, smoky, urban combat zone, it might mistake a camera for a rifle, or a civilian carrying groceries for a combatant.
So Amadei is saying deploying this for lethal autonomy right now would actively endanger our own soldiers and civilians.
Exactly, it's just not safe.
But surely the Pentagon agrees they don't want AI hallucinating and shooting the wrong targets.
They do claim they wouldn't use it that way, but, and this is the sticking point again, they wouldn't put it in writing.
Why not?
The Pentagon argued that writing those restrictions into the contract would prevent them from, quote, leading tactical operations by exception.
Leading tactical operations by exception.
Right.
That just sounds like incredible government speak for, we want the option to do it if things get really bad.
That is exactly how Anthropic interpreted it. Anthropic wanted durable assurance. The Department of War wanted total operational flexibility. They wanted the keys to the fastest car in the world, and they refused to let Anthropic install any speed governors.
So they reached a total impasse. Anthropic stands their ground. They say no, and they get hit with this devastating ban.
Yeah.
But then comes the twist. The thing that I think shocked the entire tech world. It's Friday night, just hours after Anthropic gets banned. Enter Sam Altman.
The OpenAI pivot, it was honestly lightning fast.
Yeah.
Just hours after the designation hit Anthropic, OpenAI's CEO announces they have reached an agreement with the Department of War.
Wait. I thought OpenAI also had strict policies against mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Did they just completely cave?
Well, the source describes it as threading the needle. It's very nuanced.
Okay.
OpenAI kept the principles. They released a PL statement saying, we still oppose these specific uses, but they removed the contractual prohibitions.
Oh, wow. So if it's not in the contract, how do they enforce it? If the military decides tomorrow to use GPT-6 for surveillance, what's stopping them?
OpenAI says they are relying on what they call a safety stack architecture.
A safety stack, is that just marketing fluff or is that a real technical safeguard?
It's an architectural solution rather than a legal one. Basically, instead of a legal ban, the AI model is deployed cloud only. It stays on OpenAI's servers, not on secure Pentagon servers.
Yep.
And OpenAI keeps their own security-cleared personnel in the loop. So technically, OpenAI staff have visibility into how the military is querying the model. The idea is, if they see something bad, OpenAI can just pull the plug.
But Novin seems really skeptical about this in the article.
Highly skeptical. Because there's a fundamental risk here. Contractual bans are legally enforceable. You can go to a federal judge and get an injunction. A safety stack is effectively just an internal company policy.
And internal policies can be overridden?
Yep, especially in a crisis. Novin notes that safety stacks can and will be bypassed when operational pressure gets high enough.
Right. If a war breaks out and the Pentagon calls Sam Altman and says, this is a national emergency, turn off your safety filters right now, what is OpenAI actually going to do? Say no?
Exactly. Plus, the messaging is totally ambiguous. Altman goes on TV and says the limitations are baked into the agreement, but the Pentagon puts out a statement saying they can use the AI for any lawful purpose.
Both of those things cannot be 100% true.
Right.
So it really feels like the government just shopped around until they found a vendor who would say yes to their exact contract language, even if the tech setup is this weird, complicated compromise.
And that brings us to the geopolitical and economic fallout of all this, because we are seeing a massive shift here. The source calls it a shift from a free market to a command economy dynamic in the tech sector.
Explain that. Because usually the U.S. military just wants the absolute best technology, period. If Anthropic has the smartest model, shouldn't the military want that one to win wars?
Usually, yes. And the reporting shows that Pentagon operators actually loved Claude. They tested it, and it was operationally uncontested in terms of pure reasoning capabilities.
It was the best?
It was the best. But now, the government isn't selecting the best tech. They are selecting the most compliant tech.
Wow, so even if Anthropic's model is smarter or safer or hallucinates less, it doesn't matter because they wouldn't bend the knee on the contract.
Right. And Novin argues this creates a terribly perverse incentive across the whole industry. If you spend billions building robust safety features that restrict what the government can do, you get punished. You get banned.
But if you are contractually acquiescent, you get a multi-billion-dollar deal.
Exactly. You are literally financially incentivized to remove the brakes from your AI.
But I want to push back on this because there's an argument we hear all the time. I know our listeners are thinking it right now. The China argument. All right, what about China? People say, look, if we don't build these autonomous weapons, China definitely will. So doesn't that force our hand? If we hold back because we want to be ethical, don't we just lose the next war?
Novin actually dedicates a whole section to this. He calls it the enemy capability fallacy.
Why is it a fallacy?
Because it confuses having a capability with that capability actually being effective. The expert argument here is that unreliable autonomous weapons are a strategic liability, not an asset.
Make that real for me. Give me an example.
Okay, imagine you deploy a fully autonomous drone swarm. And because AI hallucinates, the swarm gets confused by a weird reflection and bombs a civilian hospital instead of a military base.
Right, an absolute tragedy.
Or worse for the military, due to a software bug, the swarm turns around and attacked your own troops.
Friendly fire on a massive scale.
Right. Having that capability doesn't help you beat China. It ruins your international alliances, it violates the laws of armed conflict, and it causes total chaos on your own battlefield.
So the argument is that democratic restraint, keeping a human in the loop, actually makes our military stronger because the systems are reliable.
Precisely. You want weapons that do exactly what you tell them to do, not what a probabilistic algorithm guesses you want them to do in the heat of the moment.
That is a fascinating way to flip that argument. Being ethical isn't just about being the good guys. It's about not deploying glitchy, unpredictable weapons.
And there's another huge piece to this, the talent. The article mentions what it calls the Silicon insurrection.
That sounds incredibly dramatic. What is going on with the workforce?
It is dramatic. Almost immediately after the ban, hundreds of top-tier employees from Google and even OpenAI signed petitions supporting Anthropic's stance.
Wow, even OpenAI employees.
Yes, because you have to remember, the absolute best AI researchers in the world generally care deeply about safety. They got into this field to build beneficial intelligence, to cure diseases, or solve climate change. They didn't get PhDs to build automated targeting systems. If the U.S. government alienates these safety-conscious firms, those top researchers might just leave the defense sector entirely.
Or they might leave the country altogether.
Or they just go work for consumer apps. They go optimize ad clicks or work in healthcare. And then the U.S. military is left with second-tier B-team talent building their most critical national security systems.
So by trying to force this total, uncompromising control over the tech, the Department of War might actually be weakening its own long-term strategic position.
That is the central argument of Novin's piece. He outlines this as Scenario A.
Scenario A.
The government wins the staring contest with Silicon Valley, but in doing so, they lose the global AI race because they drove all the talent away.
It's chilling to think about. We're literally watching the rules of the geopolitical game change in real time.
And think about the signal this sends to the rest of the world. For years, the U.S. has been telling the EU and the U.K., hey, follow our lead. We are the responsible stewards of AI. We're the good guys.
Yeah, that is going to be a really hard case to make when you just banned your safest, most cautious AI company for being too safe.
Exactly. It hands a massive propaganda victory straight to our adversaries. They can just point at this and say, look, the Americans don't actually care about safety or human rights. It's all just raw power.
So bringing this all together, we have a domestic American company designated as a national security risk. Not because they got hacked, not because they leaked secrets to China,
Right.
but because they tried to uphold the Fourth Amendment and the Geneva Conventions in a commercial contract.
That's the perfect synthesis. It is this massive tension between stated intent, the government just saying, hey, trust us, we follow the law, and durable assurance for the company saying, no, we need to put it in the contract.
And for the first time, the raw power of national security was used to punish a company for sticking to those constitutional values.
It really is a constitutional inflection point. It fundamentally changes the relationship between the state and the private sector in America. It suggests that in this new AI era, Commercial independence might be treated as a threat if it conflicts with state objectives.
Which is a massive departure from how the American economy is supposed to work. I mean, we believe in free markets and private enterprise, not state-run tech monopolies.
It's a huge shift. It's a move toward a much more authoritarian economic structure, and it's all being justified by the sheer urgency of this global AI arms race.
Well, we've covered the timeline, we've gone deep into the red lines, the fallout with OpenAI, but as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to really chew on.
I think we should look back at the sources scenario A, but let's flip it to focus on the individual user listening right now.
Yeah, go for it.
If compliance becomes the only metric that matters to the government, if they only buy from tech companies that say yes to everything, are we creating a military and an intelligence apparatus that is technically compliant but ethically blind?
And what happens when that ethically blind software is the thing making decisions about your personal data?
Exactly. If OpenAI's safety stack fails and those hard contract protections aren't there, what is the actual tangible barrier between the citizen and the state?
If there's no contract explicitly saying you cannot build a mass surveillance machine, then the only thing stopping them is their own self-restraint.
And if you look at history, relying purely on the self-restraint of massively powerful institutions hasn't always worked out very well for the average citizen.
That is the ultimate question we're left with.
Yeah.
Is compliance worth the cost of competence? And more importantly, is it worth the cost of our privacy?
It's a question we are all going to be dealing with for a very long time. The precedent that was set this week in February 2026 is going to echo for decades.
Well, a huge thank you to the incredible insights from Fried Noven's article, The Silicon Schism. This is obviously a developing story, and we will be watching very closely to see if Anthropic's legal challenges go anywhere in the courts.
It is going to be a very long, very messy battle.
No doubt. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and maybe take a second to read the terms of service on your next update. We'll catch you next time.